try to do it in English, okay? Thank you. So, Alain, Adiel, thank you for being here. You both have deep roots in technology. And there are standards out there that would already help today. And if you can tell a little bit about these standards, and in particular also why they're so useful and what it takes to implement them. Great. Alain, you organized this with Adiel, right?
Yeah, I think we'll do okay. We want this to be just natural, so there's no preparations per se, but I think we can manage. I think when this is prepared, then because we're supposed to just introduce and engage with our colleagues here, so
we can do, because it's a small room, right?
Yeah, it should be fine, because I think we have some colleagues here who really are interested in the topics.
Thank you. I was prepared for a room of 50 people. We would not have done that.
Yeah. So you can see for a room of 50 people, maybe I was expecting to speak for 2 minutes. Only 2 minutes, because the other people also are expected to engage anyway. So, but let me start from something. I think the topic is open standard, and I think we need to define what is really open standard, because sometimes it's not obvious, and generally, for example, we're trying to say, for example, ITUT, for example, standards is not open standard, and this, etc. So there are some confusions, around what is really open standard, and especially for us who are from the internet and ITF, we think only ITF standard are open standard, etc. So I think it goes beyond what we know. But here we'll be talking about the ITF developed standard, but it goes beyond that, and I think open standard really mean that the standard developed, which are there and follow certain principle of openness, availability of standard, and the voluntary adoptions of standard, and so the standard adopted such way that people are open for people to join and contribute. The standards are available for people, and then the implementation also made available fair, because and sometimes open does not mean that you don't pay for intellectual property rights to implement some of the standard, but it should be such that it's fair for everybody, no discrimination. So you should not, one implementation should not favor one group or one community against the other. So if you do that, I think we have what we call the open standard, and it goes beyond. So the own IETF goes W3C, the other entity also develop open standard, and some of them are also used on the internet. So I think I want us maybe to have a discussion on that open standard scope before we continue. Maybe I again may disagree with me, but
okay. I don't disagree with you at all. Actually, I think setting the scene like that is important, specifically in this environment in Africa. It's important to set and clarify what open standard mean before even getting into how open standard can help improve security. Why? Because we are in a region that has a very heavy history of using standards that are built through intergovernmental organizations like ITU, where in telecom, in pure core telecom environment, those standards were used and embedded in government structure so quickly, are used to define policy and role. So it was easy for government to take them from those inter-organizational or intergovernmental structure. Now we have moved from that model to a model led and supported by the private sector or a multi-stakeholder environment like the ITF, which is disconnected from the government. And the challenge is to understand what does that really mean, how reliable those are, and how to plug them into government processes to ensure that they are used to secure the internet globally. So that definition will be important to agree on and say, well, yes, although we have moved from the model that we know to a different model, which we probably agree that it's open, how still it is open, but it's reliable, and it's something that can help. And why is it that it's open, but it's useful for security? I think it's an angle that I guess will be useful for people here to contribute to. In fact, I would like to hear from people and see their view of that.
And I can add that one particular aspect of this open standard is what we're calling the voluntary adoption. So as I just said, if you have a system, you're talking about security here. So you like that, but it's a body there who impose, say, by today, we all should adopt this new technology because it makes the things more reliable. But in this system, no, there's no authority. So it's okay. So you have a standard, you have product there, but you can't force me to adopt it and to implement. Then I think this is where the important thing is. We have solutions, okay, to secure all of these things, but because we don't have enforcement things to say no, by today everybody should deploy this technology. No, then it make the system a bit weak. And then it takes us to some time, the issue we have with PCP 38, these kind of things, show clearly, because if we were to dictate, tomorrow we will do this because it makes the things safer. But here you can't do that. You can't do that because you are adopting voluntary standard, and then so I decided maybe based on my direct interest, my knowledge, and my immediate need to adopt protocol. So we have a problem there. And I think this has been always the problem we have around this BCP 38, even IPv4, IPv6. So, okay, we wait for people to come in, it's growing, we assess, etc. All these things we have is the same because we don't force people, and you can't force people. It's based on voluntary adoptions, and then everybody has to decide where to join. And so I think this is also an important issue we have. So we have good standard, good protocol okay, but because we have this, okay, I'll call it issue, but not per se, because we knew this since the beginning, you know. But I think this is what also makes the internet so rich, so interesting that we can.
I guess it's also very much because it's global, it's across borders, right? Yeah. So whereas the technical community is working globally, the state of the art is reflected in the standards, but it's not adopted equally fast everywhere. And if you can improve the speed of adoption, that would help. And some countries, governments have an active policy to do so. Others don't, and that helps. IPv6 is part of many countries already. I think the secure internet standards are less known. But for instance, in the Netherlands, we have a platform with government, industry, and technical community. It's called Platform Internet Standards. And they together work on, so these are the standards you should comply with. And you should. You don't have to, but you should. And then players take that away. For the government, it means that all the government part, which is a good chunk also in the Netherlands of employment of organizations, they will adapt it as a standard in their practice. And with that, they also start making a difference because more people will expect that from businesses too. So it's a double whammy. So active policy in collaboration is something that helps. But the point you make about the voluntary character of the standards is crucial too. If you would want to have standards that are binding, it would take us 10 years to agree on them. And that doesn't work in this speed of change today. So it's and please raise your hand if you have any remarks, questions, or whatever.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, open standards that are related to security or securing the internet are not well known or embraced by various actors because, again, because of the openness aspect of it, the voluntary practice. I would say big operator, they have it in the core of their operation because it's part of their business model. They know that security is key for them. But the real problem comes from the collaborative and cooperation aspect of it. Because as Dr. Lee mentioned originally, the internet is made of different autonomous networks that apply different policies and practices. If the collaboration and cooperation does not exist between those different autonomous networks, we can talk about global security because the weakest link becomes the problem of the whole system. So how do we make sure that those security practices, security standards are well understood and embraced by all the actors of the ecosystem? Is one thing, and by going back to the first question, by saying what are those open standards? Why are we calling them open? Why are they open? The agility, the ability to quickly adjust them to the evolution of the technology, for instance, is one reason. So when those adjustments happen, what are the channels or the processes to reintroduce them in the collaborative environment, for instance? How do we define that? How do we set a proper framework to make everybody know that when, for instance, the standard has been updated to solve a specific security issue, this is the cycle that we will use to implement it and to see how it's impacted our operation. So those small things are important because people feel lost in the process. I mean, in general, because there is no rule that you go and sit and take, which you can read and know exactly how you bring all those things in. So trying to catalog and build a very simple framework for people to implement those things. Big operators, they have the resource to do that, but not everybody have the same resources, including a state actor or even government network, etc. How do we bring the language and bring those knowledge to the level that everybody can get it? So the fact that they are open standard may be one opportunity to do that because it's available, so it's open to everyone. How do we, increase the awareness around that?
Does everybody hear it well as well? Otherwise, we also have a microphone, but if we can do it by this way, that's easier.
You can speak in French.
Yeah. No, you can speak in French and English.
En fait, je voulais dire que dans le cadre de l'UET, moi je participe en fait dans le groupe de travail sécurité au niveau de l'UET. D'habitude, on reçoit des documents venant de l'IETF dont nous devons intégrer dans le cadre de nos travaux. Je pense que ça, c'est un cadre de collaboration et de coopération qui permet donc au gouvernement de prendre en compte ce que l'IETF fait, c'est open comme il a dit. Donc c'est un peu difficile pour le gouvernement de prendre ça. C'est pas, quand c'est ouvert, c'est pas obligatoire au gouvernement d'intégrer ça, d'intégrer dans le pool. Mais quand ça en vient de l'UET, donc là, c'est obligatoire. Donc je pense que ça aussi, c'est un cadre de collaboration. Donc, qui existe dans le cadre de l'UET. Donc, on travaille avec l'IETF. D'habitude, quand ils ont des points sur lesquels ils veulent qu'on intègre dans nos travaux, donc ils nous envoient des documents par mail dans le cadre de l'UET. Donc, après, je pense que ça aussi, c'est à prendre en compte.
Marcus, you want to try? I want to hear you, Marcus.
I'm preparing to say something. If you can do that and then later, so get it.
I think he said that she participated in the ITU working group on security that they used to get documents from ITF, which they have to incorporate in the ITU working group stuff. And He also said that the relationship between ITU and government sometimes makes us that when things come from ITU, so look like the government are more trying to look into them and then implement.
Yeah, ITU used to be very central in any.
It's very easy for them. So they receive documents from ETF to incorporate in their studies. So it will be it will be easy for us government to know what ETF to do bypassing on ITU.
Yeah.
Because we have no. It will be easy for us to participate in ITU workshop, ITU study groups than in ETF meetings. So we get ETF by ITU.
Yeah.
ITU is also participating in the IPF meetings.
But they have a collaboration, I think. Yes, they collaborate. Yes.
Yes.
The AB has a liaison, maintain
Yes.
liaison, ITF, ITU, ITUT.
I think you will find that 5G will force collaboration, where earlier ITU has been for many decades leading all the standards in telecom without any challenging. But now with IP becoming a major driver of any communications, IP is the domain of ITF. So they're forced to work together. And in 5G, you will see this come together. So I see the first practices there. ITU has the disadvantage next to their history of being alone in the field, so not used to working together, that they're less of a multi-stakeholder organization, whereas the standards for the future are made with industry together and technical community.
But now, where they are doing ITU, now they increase the focus group on what topic like on ITU, that this focus group, so also private sector can be involved in focus group. Even if you are not a member of ITU, you can be involved and you can participate and you can contribute in the focus group meetings and workshops. So each idea like AI, each of them, they create a focus group on this topic and involve private sector as a stakeholder that want to be part.
Please share.
So okay, but
And with you
you want to say something?
Yes.
Okay.
So my observation is that there are quite a number of operators, especially the incumbent operators that tend to participate at the ITU. And so equally as and governments, the regulators and policymakers attending the ITU. So the standards process of how a lot of the policy decisions that are made at the national level, there is a preference because the actual policy makers or the incumbents who are the main implementers, who are actually meant to implement some of these option is easier. On the ITF, on the other hand, which is, I don't know, this will sound controversial, but is a lot more nowadays driven by the vendor than the operators. So that means that the standards that are coming out, the adoption of those standards is the new feature. A new security implementation that you need to put. It is the vendors telling the operator that this is something you need to do. But at the end of the day, here is the invoice for you to get this new feature on this new, to implement it. And the operator says like, okay, do I need it? No. Can I plan for it maybe in 3 years' time when it's a crisis? Maybe. So the standard is developed, but the actual adoption, because one, the operator was really not involved in that process. It's vendor heavy. So as a result, we are seeing this gap in the deployment or the adoption of these new the technologies coming through the standards, because there is the commercial side, and also there is also the commitment and ownership from the operators who actually are the main beneficiaries of these solutions or these technologies. So how to bridge that gap, and I think Adiel really did point out the one which I think will be interesting is having like a timeline of, so we have this new technology, security related, what is the path to implementation that could help guide. But as long as there's the commercial side attached to that, even having the guideline will mean that businesses will adapt that based on their business planning, and that will always increase the delay to when things get adopted.
Yeah. Marcus? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Well, when Mr. was talking, you mentioned adoption of standards. I'd like to look at it from this perspective.
Maybe it is good if we indeed introduce ourselves when we speak, at least, as long as you have that background. So Marcus is the chair of Africa CERT, right?
No. Well, I'm at operations at Africa CERT.
Okay.
General base. I was saying that standards being adopted at times. How is it introduced to the community or those who are going to use it? When it's wrongly introduced, whatever you do, it will not be adopted. There's a study by an American sociologist called Rogers. He said that for a standard or an innovation to be adopted, it goes through 5 stages. And he mentioned the knowledge stage, the persuasion stage, the decision stage, to use the standards, the implementation stage, and then the confirmation stage. But generally, people are not aware that there's a standard. Truly, when you look at things, they are not aware, or they don't have clear understanding of the technology. Whether it fits them, is that we can insert them or include them in their daily business. Well, at the second stage, they are not persuaded. Well, the management to accept that the standard is good for us, let's go for it. There are so many things that goes there. Well, how do we implement it? Not very clearly defined. So the whole process, is from, and we have good standard, but we don't have them implemented. So we need to look at it from, again, from Roger's perspective. I mentioned Rogers because I use his theory to, I modify this theory in a study. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Please. So, you was first, right?
Hello everybody, I'm Logan from WACREN. I'm speaking loud enough. Okay. So,
Can you hear?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Good. So I've been involved slightly with the IETF. And some of the work that I've been involved within the IETF, I would like it to somehow transition within the mobile telecom space. But personally, I find it easier to work within the IETF than in the ITU, because from going on the website to the ITU, and I'm glad that that's someone from the ITU here, it's not very clear on how to get involved in groups such as 3GPP or groups that are involved in 5G, because it seems to be, on one side, relatively closed. And I think there's good work happening in the IETF on the IP space. For example, I think that something like ECN would be something that would be good to have in 3GPP or 5G. But from the interaction between the IETF participants and the 3GPP people, it doesn't seem to go very far. And I hope that eventually there will be better collaboration between the IETF and the ITU on those things, particularly the telecom and telephony vendors.
So, kids on the code, I'm an FNOC volunteer. Me carrying the access point probably makes me a network operator at this point, I guess. And I couldn't resist but overhearing your discussion, mentioning 5G policy. This is a government workshop thing after all. What surprises me quite a bit. So we are going to introduce something new to this 5G thing. That's all over the news. From a network point, we need network. I don't hear anybody in any government, and the Netherlands, I've asked, they don't respond at all. Guys, you're building a new network, you need numbers. There's numbers in IPv6. IPv6 is not in your 5G requirement. So I'm asking, if you work with the governments here, if all these operators, if you give them spectrum to do 5G, so they can make lots of money, please make sure for the sake of your country, for the sake of the infrastructure of your country, that you say, well, guys, you need to do this with the correct parameters, and IPv6 is a requirement. This will cost the operator money, but it is in the best interest of the country because we don't want the current address scarcity to go past the technology that should last another 20 years. And yet, with all the government people and all the people who have all these special knowledges, nobody seems to understand that you cannot do this with the networks as operators currently suggesting. Please fix this. Thank you.
That's beautiful because it's one of the areas of open standards we wanted to discuss, and you just made a perfect pitch. It's being up to speed there, and as you said, IPv6 opens a lot of new doors. Adiel?
Yeah, that's an interesting approach or case about what we are talking about. IPv6 has been there for a while. I mean, everybody knows that it has came to solve a specific scarcity problem. But the problem or the issue with 5G is that most of the vendors are not selling 5G because specifically focusing on the identifier, because they think they wouldn't need IPv6 at all to deploy 5G, because with network slicing that comes with 5G, they can build as many as private, network based on private address, because they don't touch each other. So they are completely independent. So they think that's how they are going to deploy it, and that's how vendors are actually positioning the thing, because they see that, well, IPv4 are costing fortunes. We don't want to invest in IPv6 transition anymore. There is a solution. You don't need all of those things. Use your private network. So that is a completely different approach to networking. But what can we do? How does this messaging of no, you need those identifiers to have a global approach to the network. Those regulation or government has to be involved and understand the link between the two. That's a valid question. So unfortunately, operators are not around the table when those discussions are done. It's only between vendors and regulators.
That's why I was saying communication. The main.
Yes, I want to shift a little bit the things back and say that maybe in response to Marco's that even at ITF, the standard and the document are developed based on some problem statement. So there are some needs identified. So the standard, by default, are developed to solve problems. So it's not that some people sit somewhere and just look at the wall and say no. So then there are people who participate at that. But the important point is what Michuku said: those who participated at ITF more the vendors than the telcos. Okay, so sometimes you see a problem of people saying that, okay, you guys are design standard, but you have no clue on how this thing really works. So you look like you have a group of people running theories, Okay, but there were people who said we run the network, and we know. But then these people who run the network maybe are not active there or are not vocal over there. So we have some challenges there, etc. How these things work. So I want us to go back to how do we, in African context, implement, before we spoke talk about DNSSEC or the email system, etc., domain DKIM, DMARC, etc. Because I think we may be running out of time.
Yes,
okay. So, but on this, I want to say something like, okay, over the year we've seen some transformation, okay, and some consolidation. Now the real connectivity is now provided by the telcos. So the ISPs who were supposed to be, we come to AFNOC to be trained, seem to have disappeared. Then we are back to the telcos to provide the access. Okay. Then if you look at the email space, I'm sure a very few people here still use company email address. So Gmail. So that's like people are not even now trying to develop and maintain email to know what is SPF, what is the DKIM. So I don't want to go there. I'm happy with Gmail. And then people are more happy and they use Facebook. So the thing has shifted, and then I want us to see how this really, the implementation of this thing really work in our context. So so look like the thing has shifted elsewhere. And maybe people here, we may not have the impact in addressing the security issue using this open standard because the thing has shifted to people using Facebook and these things. So we don't have control of Facebook network, etc., or all of these new what we talk. So I want us to look at them. So instead of maybe looking at this spec one by one, but I want us to look at how the new internet, okay, environment where you don't even the hosting cloud. We are not in, for example. We are not in here in the African sense, but okay. So maybe we have to focus more on education of the end users, but not really in the implementation or developing now the solution, etc. So,
Daniel speaking. This is a very interesting discussion regarding open standards. If you speak about the deployment of infrastructure, I think the very first culprits are the ISPs and the operators. Way back, I think 3-4 years ago, there was a very strong drive for IPv6 adoption, and they all spoke about it. Given the case for Uganda, by that time we had Orange Telecom, and they seem to be on top of their game. They got at least the first block of IPv6 services from RPKI. But when it came to the deployments, it took some time for deployment, and up to now, still the ISPs are still running IPv4. I think there is need for a harmonized way in which the policies or regulators are deploying IPv6. Then when it comes to data centers and data structures, following the first update that I think happened in Dakar, Senegal, it was highlighted that it was a recommendation that different governments or regulatory bodies to start promoting appropriate data centers in their respective regions. But up to now, I think there's still a few countries that are deploying data centers and coming up with appropriate open methodologies that can be able to suit this. So I think it's not only the role of the regulators only, but I think also the providers in implementing these respective technologies. We may think that probably for Africa, we are still very far in the deployment of these technologies. But I think based on the fast-paced environments between the European countries, American countries deploying 5G, I think it gives us a learning experience on how technology is going to evolve, how IoT is going to come and suit into all this. And these standards, I think, have to be harmonized and deployed. I think there's still more need for awareness, collaboration, and capacity building to make sure that there is even distribution of knowledge platforms in open standard development within the Africa region. Thank you, Alani. That's my opinion.
Adiel, you want to say something? So again, we have priority, but we
don't have. It's an open dialogue. I think the discussion, more and more we are getting into the discussion, more and more it's becoming clear that the challenge we are facing when it comes to securing the internet is about effective collaboration and cooperation between policymakers. I will continue saying that because that is an important element of the whole game. Coming from the technical perspective, for a long time we have believed that the private sector by itself can implement those best practices, but not that they don't want to do it, they want to do it, but there are so much business consideration that make shift the priority to somewhere else, and that is human nature. You cannot solve that, right? So that's where two-way education is important. Education of people who are going to use it to understand how they can raise the bar of their expectation from those who are providing them the service. And the second aspect is those who can enforce the minimum level to protect the weakest. So that is the policymaker side. How do we build effective collaboration, coordination, all the core between those three elements? Because we cannot effectively talk about security, implementation of open standard, the implementation of best practices, all those things, if there is no effective link or connection between those two. It goes through education, capacity building, yes. Who do you educate? The end user, the operators, the regulators that set the rule. And because the internet nowadays is moving back to the big telecoms, those who have license, who are accountable to whom? To the government, to the policymakers, to the regulators. It's a business deal. It's not about the beautiful internet. No, it's not about that anymore. It goes back to where it was originally, which is business deal. How do we make sure that in that business relationship, we ensure that the open policy that has made the internet what it is today is still in there? Otherwise, we're going to completely lose sight of it, because operator will even completely ignore those standards and develop their own. As soon as it's working and the customer is not asking anything, that's it. And it's happening. I mean, Google deploy stuff on their network. That is not standard, right? But they do it. They don't care. They bring in the money. So I think that is a challenge for us, for us all here. The standard will be there. There are some people who need to implement them. How do we make sure that they are requested to do that? It's about IPv6. If customers don't ask for IPv6, nobody's going to deploy it. What is the value for my network? What is the value for my business? It's always the question that the operator will continuously ask. And if nobody tells them, the value is not monetary, it's for people's goods, then you have to do it. So that's a challenge that we need to continuously think about and see how we deal with it.
Yeah, Marcus. No, first, I think we should be.
No, what I want to say has to do with. When you look at this, I look at it from our inability to communicate clearly the benefits we derive from using the standards. And the second, our inability to have the right strategy to implement the standards. That's the way I see it.
But who communicates about it? Who should communicate? Who is the communicator?
I said our inability. Those who know about the standard, those who develop it, we want to forward it to the.
Yeah. So I want us to be precise. When I say we, who is the we? Is it the ITF? Is it us individually? Is it the government? Who is the we?
Those who are trying to solve the problem.
Thank you.
Okay, so going back to what Alain asked with respect to Africa, what is really, what are the things we need to consider? I think I would start from a point of, are we engaging the right people? As we've said that, yes, we're doing workshops at AFNOC. Who is showing up? Are the mobile operators, who are the largest internet providers in the continent, are they showing up? Unfortunately, they're not coming for these workshops. So they don't know what standards. The standards they're implementing are vendor-driven, right? If the vendor tells them this is what you need to deploy, then that's what they will deploy. But are the vendors actually thinking the security side of things? They're more thinking of MPLS and 5G and whatever other technology that requires, yes, it's bottom line driven. So at what point do we then need to engage these operators to start thinking about these operational aspects that have had large implications? And let's think about it. Recently, Nigeria last year caused an incident of routing insecurity, sending an outage, that affected one of the large CDNs. Hey, my country was just hit the other week, right? The government websites of my country's websites were defaced, and quite a number of them. Why is that? So, if we are getting the people in the right people in the room and having these conversations, we may have some traction. Again, the keyword here being made. But what is lacking is that we do not have a platform right now where we can get to speak to these operators and get this message passed along. And I'll tell you why I think this is important. In Kenya, we had an opportunity to sit down with government and say, you need to do encryption, HTTPS. And they say, well, yeah, we would like to do it, but it's coming to $200,000 to buy these certificates. They said, well, there's something called Let's Encrypt. You can use it. And they were like, how much does it cost? It's free. So I don't need to ask anybody in the procurement to buy, no. Okay, we sat down. I think Kevin and I sat down with a guy from the government, walked him through. All government websites the following week were all on Let's Encrypt. Speaking to the cost, it didn't cost, because if it goes through procurement, it's a whole tender process, and you will know what happens with government tender processes, right? If it was not budgeted this year, you have to wait for the next budget year, and so on and so forth. Who wins? Then there is a corruption issue, and so all those things. So getting to have the discussions with the right target audience. But the question is, who is going to be the person bringing together the target audience? Because we can say that, but if we don't have a mechanism of saying, what is our strategy? Who first is the entity? And what is the strategy that entity is using? And entity here is just a big word. It could be a group of people. It could be a task force. It could be anything. What is their strategy to engage government? What is their strategy to engage the operators, the mobile operators? So making sure that if we're having a roundtable, focusing on, let's say, routing security, RPKI, the decision makers who sign off, we are doing RPKI over the next 6 months, are actually in that room. If they're not in that room, nothing's going to happen. If the governments who don't understand why they're getting defaced or why HTTPS is important, the person who makes that decision is not in the room, nothing happens. If the person is in the room, within a week, they understand, okay, I don't need to sign off. Let's Encrypt is there, it works. Here's an example of how it's done in Kenya. All governments will have HTTPS. But if they don't understand, oh, the reason you're getting spam is because you don't have SPF records and all these things, if the right person is in the room, they'll go back and say, you need to do 1, 2, 3. I want to see the results in the next 5 weeks. But we don't have that mechanism to reach out to the actual people who are implementing. And of course, the priority on the other side is vendor-driven, very economic. And so the soft aspects, I'll call them soft aspects of SSL, will get completely missed out because there's no big money. 200,000 and a couple of $1 million. That is lost in the budget somewhere. So unless you have a local champion in those organizations, you completely lose that.
I have a question to that. Hi, good morning. My name is Yuri Ito. I'm from Cybergreen. So that's JP stuff. When you're talking to the policymaker to make that policy decision, what type of materials or stories is useful, empowering you to convince them from the operators community?
And then just for all clarity, at the end of the day, we want to go to action planning, where this becomes a good subject as well. I would also love to use the time to introduce some of the major standards that we are talking about here, and collect more insights before we go to the final discussion here. So yes, please, if you have a short answer, great. If it's a longer one, let's develop it together in the afternoon. And maybe Tarek has a different question.
Okay. This is maybe the third time that I attend the Akplogan, and I think African country is more affected by the connectivity issues than the cybersecurity issues. Okay. First of all, as you can see, last week we have about 5 or 6 tracks. 4 of them is related to connectivity, only 2 related to cybersecurity. This is why we would like to have, for example, 3 tracks for connectivity and 3 tracks for cybersecurity, and to learn people, especially people who work in the network, about the security issues, because to resolve OpenATP and DDoS attack, but they never see that. This is why I would like maybe next year we will do together people from cybersecurity and people from network to work together to see a real life and hand-on DDoS attack and how we can mitigate and how we can reduce the attack.
And I think the biggest challenge between some entities is the lack of appropriate policies. I'll give a case in point of one of the key government entities in charge of procurement and logistics in Uganda here. I happened to be going through their website. Actually, they reached out to me because they could not access their website because it didn't have HTTPS. So I mentioned the case of having that security part of it. And the IT person who was in charge of that was not aware. And then I asked them, do you have like a policy that governs IT and security before the ministry? And they're like, we don't have all that. That's just the duty of another ministry, Ministry of ICT. But I'm like, but we need to have like something that is governing all that. So I think there is need for capacity building of key experts and personnel that are in these entities to come up with an appropriate policy, and in their respective ICT policies and security policies, they need to update their respective standards to follow certain procedures. I think that helps. So the next thing came into deployment of HTTPS, and like, we need to have a budget of this. Government will have to go through procurement, but like there is open tools like let's say. And like, no, government has a procedure with implementation. Right now, as I'm speaking, the website is down, and they're still waiting for top management to be able to approve certain processes, which is good. I think that is so much typical of very many government entities, unlike the private sector, whereby they're so keen on how their business is running. I think it cuts across what is the private and the government. I think they have different ways of doing things. Thank you. That's my previous section.
Yes, I think I want to join Yuki by saying that it looks like we are admitting a fellow here that because a long time ago we said we should stop talking to each other. We should open up and try to reach out to the other people instead of trying to exchange best practice among ourselves. So it looks like okay, we still not really done the real things, reaching out the real people over there. But as Nick said, the target is also changing. And sometimes when you think you are close to a group, a core group who can have impact, the things change, etc. And when I hear that we should do education, we we are not capacity building. Sometimes if you look at in our countries, in IT management, and all of them seem to know something. But then the question is, why?
That used to be. And what I've seen over the last years is that from all groups, people say we need to understand each other better. And that's a good step towards working together, which is now happening. And I think really what's been remarked, like some people need to understand better how IPv6 and 5G works. How do you get the right people around the table? Who are the right people? Is it just operators? Or is it operators plus business plus government? Same for getting that platform to meet. In some countries, in some regions, these platforms emerge. And we learn from that. And it can be done anywhere, as long as we open our minds to that and the willingness to do it. Yes, there's always obstructions for commercial reasons, for political reasons, or just because technical persons think they know better, which I've been running into too. And these obstructions are just pebble stones in a field of future development. So that's if you address those, I think we can do that. Just one remark on finding the balance between cybersecurity and connectivity. In that, I think if you get the message out, it's not either or, but this is your opportunity to find it. We make great progress. Very much agree with where the discussion is coming. It's like, how do we get it across? We had several specific open standards we wanted to talk about. As such, mentioning them is enough because the information is out there. Maybe we want to talk a little bit more about that, or would we want to talk about continue this? It's up to you and Adiel.
Well, maybe I think we should.
Add a contribution towards OpenTF.
Go ahead. We want to shift.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
In half an hour to some.
okay. So I think for open standards, I agree with a lot of what's been said. In the work that we do, specifically in Africa, ISOC, we try to work with engineers to get them involved in open standards. But sometimes we ask ourselves, are we getting them into the game too late? Because getting into the development of open internet standards, it takes some time. You can't train an engineer today and expect him that next month or next week he's going to be able to contribute. So over the years that we've tried to work and we do a lot of stuff with AfriLink, we've come to the realization that perhaps the students coming out of the universities. They may be a good audience to start talking to them about open internet standards and all these organizations, ITF, ITU, and so on. So when they get to the job market, they already know, why these standards are important, why these organizations are important, and also how they can actually contribute. Because once you hit the job market and you're there for 4 years, 5 years, you get into the vendor stream. The company buys you this big box. You have to switch it on. You have to do what it says. Read the manual. The manual says connect the cable here, put this configuration. That's it. So once they hit the job market, it's a bit late. So for sharing here with the audience, if you're in a position to go back and talk to universities, teaching the ITF and teaching about ITU, teaching about W3C, I think can have long-term benefits. It won't help today, it won't help tomorrow, but in the near future, it's something that we could get benefit from, especially in this region. Then I just wanted to mention something about governments. I think it was mentioned about governments and open internet standards. There is a model which we came across, I think, from Brazil, where the government said that open standards are very important, and we need people who can be going to these meetings to come back and inform us and tell us which standards are coming, which standards are important for security, which standards are important for deployment, so that we're not caught by a new technology that changes the way we use it. So they had a model where they would send, I think, 5 to 10 professors from the university to, I think, a year of ITF, I think 3 or 4 ITF meetings. And they were to come back and advise the government and tell them that this standard is coming, it's important, this standard is coming, it's important. It might be an interesting model to try here, because if our governments were to be engaged in what's happening with 5G and so on, and they are aware of what's coming, rather than a vendor has shown up today and told you, I'm here with a device, but having a way to prepare them and know, like, this standard is coming, something you need to follow up on. HTTPS is important, you need to do this, SMTPS, SPF, and so on. And there are so many new standards coming up, especially on email. Last month, I think Gmail deployed a new MTA STS or something to further secure their own email platform. Is it something we're ready for? Probably not, because we're not involved, or we don't really know what that standard is, how it works. So just a couple of thoughts of what we could do. This week, actually, with Aflinic, we are trying to engage university students here in Kampala, and also participants, engineers who are here on an open internet standards event. Hackathon at AIS is in its third year, and we are trying, but I guess there's a lot more we could do, and we're always open to hear from others who are also trying.
Yes, I think we still have time. How many minutes?
We have 25 minutes before Christian.
Oh, okay. So I think maybe let's look at some of the standards, but I think we should. I don't want to talk about the email, the DKIM, DMARC, or I want us maybe to focus. I think we spend all the time on the numbers IPv6, so maybe we should talk about DNSSEC, because DNSSEC with the DANE also that relates to how we can secure and bootstrap some of the security issues. Yeah. And then ICANN just completed the KSK rollover, and then maybe discuss a little bit of the routing security, RPKI, OAN, etc.
And if you can link that to specific events that happen to people that can be prevented with it, that would be beautiful.
So,
Merci, je vais parler en français. Je vais parler en français. Madame, je suis Bachar, spécialement du gouvernement nigérien. Ok. Je disais, je suis Bachar, je viens du gouvernement nigérien. Donc, ce que je voulais dire, c'est que les gros problèmes, c'est au niveau des différents gouvernements. Spécialement en Afrique, c'est-à-dire quand j'ai regardé les membres qui sont membres du JFC, GFCA, il y a moins de pays africains. C'est-à-dire, donc, ce que je voulais dire, la communication doit aller envers ces grands gouvernements pour les amener. Parce que tous les problèmes se posent à l'ennemi. Ce sont eux les décideurs qui prennent des décisions. Dans chaque pays, quand on voit, par exemple, les décideurs, les décisions viennent des politiciens. Or, ils ont souvent des préoccupations, c'est-à-dire qu'ils ne voient pas l'aspect, spécialement pour ce qui est du numérique dans beaucoup de nos pays. Quand je prends le cas, par exemple, de nos pays, c'est maintenant qu'on est en train de museler, c'est-à-dire manger. Donc, c'est ce que je voulais dire. Il faut qu'il y ait encore plus de communication pour amener les différents gouvernements à comprendre et à aller dans ce sens.
Okay. No, you want to translate?
Non. Je veux lui répondre en français.
En français, oui.
Dans le cadre des pays africains, des gouvernements, l'Union africaine est en train de faire beaucoup de choses. Dans le cas du GFC, par exemple, la prochaine réunion du GFC se tiendra à etc. Donc, cela pour même inclure beaucoup de chefs d'État, beaucoup de pays africains dans le GFC. Je pense qu'il y a beaucoup de sensibilisation qui est en train de se faire du côté de l'Union africaine, du côté de la CEDEAO. Maintenant au gouvernement eux-mêmes d'être conscient de l'ampleur du phénomène et de s'y mettre. Je pense que le Niger est en train de faire beaucoup de choses dans ce domaine-là avec le ministère.
So the question he was asking is, or what he was raising is, how do we get more government involvement in this discussion? Because he noticed that there is very few African governments that are actually participating and involved in the GFC, and haven't seen many government involved in that. And I think this is very specific to our region, whereby government has still had very important role into policy making and driving even the economy, I would say, because the industry itself is not that developed as other region. We are more into a consummation, more than participation in most of the time, which makes everything felt back to government. So that goes back to how do we communicate? How do we convince the government to come around the table to participate? Because something was mentioned, government in Africa, they trust the ITU alike because they are intergovernmental organization. Because because that fits very well into their processes. Well, the reality says that. I mean, and that takes time to change. Some understand, but not all. It's still hard to get them to understand that open standards are there. They are voluntary, but they are good to implement. They don't have to go through the ITU. You said it when you started. You said the cooperation between ITU and the ITF is to take ITF standard, pass it through ITU to get it implemented.
I think now our government are aware that in ITU, Korea, China are more powerful than Africa. So they know that their ideas or their needs are not being completely, in ITU. So they are being aware about that. So I think they will be.
Okay. Let's talk about cloud security, RPKI and all that. So the incident, the Lagos one, I don't think it was leaks, not origin hijacking. The incident it was a leak. So because we have two different issues: the origin hijacking, which we're supposed to protect with ROAS, and the leaks. I think this one was the leaks. So someone who was supposed to not announce certain prefix, so it happened. So this is a different topics, and we're supposed to be a different solution for that. But what we have right now, we have something we call RPKI, Resource Public Infrastructure, where if you are routing some IPs, then you issue a document, to allow people validate that you have the right to originate. But I think the DNRO published RPKI adoptions, so it looked like Africa seems to be doing well, but we are 0.0 something. But if you look at the global adoption of RPKI, you look like Africa is doing well. Okay. But because the global adoption of RPKI is still low, but it's something we need to consider. And so the problem also is, again here, is that people don't see the immediate effect, because if I put my ROA, if you don't validate, so we still have this issue. And then if, for example, if me, I'm saying, oh, me, I'm concerned more about the root links than your origin, so you see the priority and the need are not always, so yeah, so we have this kind of thing. So, but I think so the idea should be, and this, I think in security, this is what we tell people: get any solution you may have in place can help you. So, for example, I think I advise people, get your ROA there. Even people are not validating, get your ROA there, etc. So, I think it's something we need to encourage. So, yeah. So, let's discuss.
Yeah. The important thing that came up in other workshops was that some of these standards need involvement of the end users, and some don't. And that seems to be an important factor in rapid deployment. I can also see that you may want to phase things in that way. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, I think we have to address that, to separate the security from two aspects. The security of the infrastructure, it will be hard to get end users involved in securing the infrastructure. You will never explain to a user that having their ROA and using RPKI has benefit for them. They don't see that. What they will see from other aspects are probably, how do you know that the website is secure? How do you know that when you are entering your credit card, you need to check some basic information? So that's the user perspective of the security. But if you go back to the standard that we're talking about, the RPKI, DNSSEC, those are more infrastructure level, and the experience has shown that user has very little influence into getting operators to deploy those things, but they don't get it. Coming back to RPKI, I think lately we have seen an increased interest from operators to implement RPKI because of the more and more incidents that are happening, and the fact that the IP environment itself is evolving, whereby the right to route is increasing. I mean, the importance of having the right to route is increasing, and there is an emerging of coalition of operators that are actually making it mandatory for them to use. So again, the reality, what is happening on the ground, inform those policy decisions. Unfortunately, in our region, we play a very little role in the global market. Our participation is so low that we don't see that. But again, having people who can help those things take up in our context, I will continue saying that the voluntary thing has shown its limitation in our context. We need to bring people who can influence that around the table, which are government policy makers, people who mobile operators, those who are today handling the market. From DNSSEC perspective, that is the same thing. I'm having a presentation a little bit later today about securing the DNS infrastructure, where we are seeing, when you ask people today, do you have a DNS infrastructure? Very few people know even if they are actually running a DNS in their network and their infrastructure. And what is the impact of that DNS on their overall security? They don't know. But recent incident has shown that the DNS has always been the first point of entry of most of the security incidents. So if you don't even know that you're running a DNS and you don't even know how vulnerable your DNS infrastructure is, how can you think about DNSSEC? How can you think about other security aspect of this? So back to the very important aspect of knowledge, of awareness, not only at the technical level, but at the decision maker level. That's that way. And we see that people quickly take decision to implement the DNSSEC when they are affected, when they see really real life incident affecting. That is only when they decide. They implement, but they don't validate, for instance, because they have it there, but they don't validate because they think, okay, as soon as I have my zone sign, it's fine. I don't need to validate. Well, validation is important in the whole process. If you don't validate, yes, you have the key, but you don't close the door. It doesn't make sense. So the holistic approach in our region, I think we will never say it enough. For me, that is an important aspect. Probably we'll talk more about that this afternoon when we start talking about the solution aspect of it. But
when you talk about DNSSEC, do you actually see people use it, or is it just a time bomb that we add to our DNS infrastructure that goes off even with well-experienced operators who kind of forgot that they need to give you a key or the infrastructure is there? When I download the collaboration system, be it Windows, be it macOS, I download the typical browser. I don't get the warning DNSSEC is not working. Oh. So currently, there's all this talk about DNSSEC. At this point, I only see disadvantages, not the advantages, which is a shame.
Well, yeah.
Let's call a dog a dog.
Yeah.
Just one statistic from the WACREN, 203 words for PKI.
Just from how many members?
I'll give you a statistic. And one more thing concerning DNSSEC, a few years ago, the government of Mauritius signed the government website for DNSSEC. Even though they asked their service provider for it, and eventually it was done, for a couple of years they didn't think about renewing the keys and things like that. So investing into the operational aspects of DNSSEC is the challenge once you get one of the entities to actually do DNSSEC. And it's not a zero cost for them because it involves resources.
DNSSEC, I wonder how it is in African countries. In the Netherlands, we see quite a bit of DNSSEC. Why? Because the registrar gives a lower cost for domain registration if your domain is DNSSEC signed. This sounds good, right? No, it isn't. Because the people who take advantage of this are the domain name partners. Because they can park the domains at a lower fee. As long as a domain that is slightly misspelled and goes into some questionable website is DNSSEC signed because the registration of the domain was cheaper. But I cannot get to my bank because my bank is not DNS signed. So, well, we have to think about DNSSEC, but really, no, it's not working. And I wonder how it is, if it is different in Africa.
Oh, it's not operationally. There is always a gap. I don't think it's not different. As Logan was saying, it's mandatory, but they are not following the process, and that asks the question about the guideline, how easy it is to provide simple guidelines to those operators about what to do instead of going back to read the whole RFC and know how to maintain the key in their whole DNSSEC infrastructure. How much do we promote those best practices as well comes in mind. sometimes seen from outside, people think that implementing them are complex and add costs to their whole the cost to maintaining their network, the cost of and they don't feel encouraged to do that investment. Where it's just a mindset shifts, because you have to do things differently and move your priority differently, and they are not prepared to do that.
Yeah. So then I also see we have a paradox, because 20 years ago, when we were doing internet, we didn't have all these resources. We were just only carrying that sendmail book. And you are in your corner, you have to build something. But now everybody has access to internet, and all these resources are there, best practices, everything, so they have access to all kind of tools, but we do have a problem. we do have a problem. Or maybe more resources now become a problem for you guys. We didn't have all of these things, but we are able to build something. Now you go to the internet, DNSSEC, you see RPKI, there are resources, but we still have a problem. So I don't know, maybe we have to filter what we publish. Look at it, more you publish, the more you confuse people. I don't know. Because when I see here that people are not knowing what to do, how to find the resources, then I'm confused, because we didn't have all of these things. When you have a chance to meet, maybe get them sometime, they give you one book on UECP, you take that book home, then you try to read and implement that. But now, everything's there, but we still have a problem to implement some basics, so I don't know.
That's the communication issue. First, that's the communication issue. Second, that's the goals that we want to achieve. If we are looking at different, sides that we don't, so I have my problems and I don't care about what problems that the other country have, that becomes a problem. But if we have come together in order to achieve one goal, and in order to communicate and know what we want, that will be even, better. I do remember the communication that Mr. just gave about the cyber green. Because we have all statistics here in Africa. We can take the statistics and see leverage where we are, what's the problem, how we can help other countries to achieve the goals that they have to achieve. Then we come together. We have African Union, we have the presidential meeting. What we're doing, why we the experts are not taking the information there, be discussed there, and leave from there with the goals to be achieved. We're not doing that. We have all the experts that are saying that, I can do this, I have PhD, I have masters, and then what? Nothing is happening.
Actually, when you talk about information,
we have a number of remote users, so please identify yourself.
When you talk about information, it's something that I would like to ask, because now talking about information, earlier there was talk about ITU. Oh, by the way, here on the notes, random volunteer, no official one. If I want to get an IETF document, I can just download it, and there may be airtime involved, and I can download it. I wonder, and again, specifically at the African continent, ITU documents are not free, and often, for instance, require payment by credit card. And I think that credit cards in Africa is a problem. So, when you talk about freedom of information, when you talk about freedom of information about technology, I think the ITU, as it currently stands, is way, way, way behind, because not because they are charging, 150 euros for a document, which is a lot, but still, but because they lock out part of the community that they are supposed to be serving. And I think that is an important point. So, documentation.
So thanks for this, and I think what we see is also some century.
Just one question for Logan. You mentioned the experience in Mauritius where the DNSSEC become mandatory, but in the implementation it's not working. What is happening? How is the community addressing that issue? How is the government addressing the issue? How operators are you addressing it? Because that's where the lesson
I raised the issue one time with the CTO of the Ministry of ICT, and he said, okay, he told me he forwarded the request, but as to now, nothing much has happened. The internet community is still trying to engage the government to adopt the best practices for DNSSEC. So far, they've been somewhat slow to respond. I believe it's maybe something internally because we have to organize resources and train the people to better understand DNSSEC. And related to that, they need to, of course, invest resources. And maybe their service provider doesn't have those resources right now. So it's a funny question of patience and re-engaging them several times.
Okay, I just want to, because we're in the transition towards Christian. I think it's been a very good discussion, and it raised some points that it's also good to not try to find solutions for immediately. Let it sink in. Let's hear more about the other practices, and at the end of the day, let's bring it all together. There's a clear need for good awareness, more information, trusted platforms for that information, because who do we trust for information nowadays, right? So just one example that I have of a website that is trusted in the Netherlands is provided by non-profits, collaborative work from technical community, government, and business, internet.nl. And what it does is it tests websites. And it tests websites on items like IPv6, DNSSEC, HTTPS security options, not only on whether it's implemented, but also how it's implemented, the quality of the implementation. And it comes back with information on what settings could be improved. This is an example of a platform that may have helped with really implementing those standards. If you feel that's needed, it can help you to measure. Dutch government agencies are all asked to test their website to live up to these standards. And for instance, if you type in any name, something would come out. We can try one just for the fun of it. Which one should we do? fmog.org, right?
Yeah.
So it tests. One of the things while the test is running, I'm saying one of the reasons of showing this tests the hard technical details. It does it in English and Dutch, but it puts it in a Dutch context. So how does this work in Holland, etc. What you can see is that you may want to apply it. Maybe do something else. Maybe provide also help links to local bodies like FNOC. Although FNOC hasn't signed its name in DNSSEC. It may have HTTPS, but not fully. And there's other applications you should send. And then if you go through the report, you find all kind of information about what this means and what to do with it. Now, the code behind this is available for use in your own context if you would want that as well. So just one of the suggestions to think of for the data today is whether such an application regional would be useful or whether just a promotion of using the Dutch version would be good enough.
Let's not use FNOC let's not use FNOC as an example. I've wrote accessible box. And I know the background for some of the errors that are made. There's unfortunately operational reasons why things are not completely up to scratch. So, as an example for using the functionality is excellent, but again, please don't take it on us because the webmaster has been built, for instance. Just to put one example.
Good. Geert-Jan de Groot, right.
Right was 22 years ago.
But you're even older than right.
Sorry?
You're even older than right.
No. I joined Right when there were 4 people.
Okay. Very welcome. So the next is I would love to
I joined Right when there were 4 people.
Christian, I see there's some delay in the next sound. If we talk, Christian, I see there's some delay in the well, Christian is now, and in half an hour we have the full break. Yeah, because Christian is bound to the time he is on video. Yeah, but Christian is really timed for this one. If it's okay, in half an hour we'll be ready for that. Sorry for the whip, but how do we get Christian online?
Just unmute you.
I'm sorry?
Just unmute your mic.
Okay.